Can I keep you up? Take it to them. Yeah, terrace house. Yeah, we've got the police on the way. Have you any idea what's caused the fire?
The sinister legacy of Mick Philpott, a family's descent into tragedy. When the facade of a loving father shatters, what lurks beneath is often unimaginable. Join us as we delve into the harrowing tale of Mick Philpott, a man whose brutal actions revealed a heart devoid of humanity, culminating in a crime that shook a community to its core. They say that every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child. This stark truth rings hauntingly true in the tragic tale of Mick Philpott, a man whose name would soon send shivers down the spine of an entire nation. On May 11, 2012, the world was thrust into disbelief as the horrifying news broke. Philpott, a seemingly ordinary father from Derby, had committed the unthinkable. He extinguished the lives of his 6 children, turning their home into a house of horrors. As we peel back the layers of this chilling narrative, we are drawn into a dark labyrinth where love was twisted into something monstrous. Philpott's life unfurls like a cautionary tale, a sinister reflection of a man who reveled in manipulation and greed. What kind of father would sacrifice his own flesh and blood for a shot at money and notoriety? As we venture into the shadows of Philpott's past, we will uncover the chilling motivations behind his actions and the psychological depths of a man who turned his own children into mere pawns in a grotesque game. Prepare yourself for a harrowing exploration of the mind of a killer, a tale that serves as a grim reminder of the darkest corners of humanity, where innocence is sacrificed on the altar of greed and betrayal. Mick Philpott was born in 1956 in Derby, England, a city steeped in industrial grit but plagued by its own shadows. From the very beginning, his life was marred by instability and turmoil. Raised in a fractured household, his formative years were anything but nurturing. Philpott's parents struggled with their own demons, creating an environment where love was scarce and conflict was abundant. It was in this cauldron of dysfunction that Mick began to mold his worldview, a lens distorted by resentment and a desperate craving for attention. As a child, Philpott often found himself overlooked, the backdrop to his parents' chaotic relationship. This neglect would sow the seeds of narcissism within him, shaping his personality into something both sinister and cold. Fast forward to adulthood, and Mick Philpott had transformed into a man whose personality was steeped in narcissism, making him dangerously charming yet wholly untrustworthy. In his eyes, even the most sacred bonds, such as those with his own children, were merely avenues for financial gain. In the years that followed, Philpott's insatiable greed and warped perspective would distort his familial relationships. To him, children were not cherished beings deserving of love and care. They were commodities, cash cows to be exploited. This twisted perception influenced not only how he treated his own offspring, but also how he navigated the world around him. In his mind, each child represented a potential ticket to welfare checks and government assistance, an inexhaustible source of income that he could leverage for his own gain. In a tragic twist of fate, the very greed that drove Philpott would lead him down a path from which there was no return. The horrors of his childhood, combined with his pathological need for control, would culminate in an act so heinous that it would shake the foundations of society. As we delve deeper into the disturbing events that followed, we must confront the chilling reality of a man who was not only a product of his environment, but also a harbinger of unspeakable tragedy. He met Kim Hill in Derby, and from the moment they crossed paths, he enveloped her in an intoxicating whirlwind of romance. With his sharp wit and magnetic presence, Philpott swept Kim off her feet, leading her to believe she had finally found someone who understood her. But as the roses wilted and the nights turned darker, the charming facade began to crack, revealing a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. The first signs of his violent nature emerged slowly, like the creeping shadows at dusk. Tensions escalated until one fateful night when they found themselves at a local pub, surrounded by laughter and drinks. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as a trivial argument spiraled into chaos. In a shocking display of rage, Philpott grabbed a pool cue and unleashed a brutal attack on Kim, sending shockwaves through the patrons and leaving her bloodied and bruised. This was not an isolated incident. It marked the beginning of a terrifying descent into an abusive relationship that would haunt her for years to come. The horror reached its zenith when, in a fit of rage, Philpott attempted to take Kim's life. In a savage moment of desperation, he plunged a knife into her, leaving her fighting for her life in a pool of her own blood. The sheer brutality of the attack sent ripples through their community, sparking outrage and disbelief. Philpott was arrested, his charming mask shattered, revealing a man consumed by violence. Behind bars, however, he remained manipulative and cunning. He penned letters to Kim, twisting the narrative, painting himself as the victim of circumstance. His words dripped with a calculated charm designed to ensnare her emotions, leaving her in a psychological purgatory. After his release, Philpott wasted no time in seeking new victims to exploit. He married Pamela, but the pattern of abuse resurfaced with chilling familiarity. His charm faded quickly, revealing a domineering presence that dictated her every move. The cycle of control and violence ensnared Pamela, just as it had Kim. The explosive arguments were often punctuated by physical assaults, leaving her trapped in a world of fear. As if the universe conspired to repeat the horrors of his past, Philpott soon moved on to Heather Keogh, a woman unaware of the tempest that awaited her. The same volatile pattern emerged. Moments of apparent affection were interlaced with sudden outbursts of aggression. The relationships Philpott forged were not mere connections. They were battlegrounds where power dynamics shifted violently, leaving a trail of broken lives in their wake. As the shadows deepened around him, it became increasingly clear that Philpott was not just a man, he was a monster cloaked in the guise of charm. The question lingered: how many more would fall victim to his insatiable need for control and dominance before the storm finally broke? In the world of Mick Philpott, every moment of tenderness was merely a prelude to terror, and the victims, once full of hope, became unwitting actors in his dark and twisted narrative. As we delve deeper, we must brace ourselves for the heart-wrenching aftermath of his actions, a tale of despair that will leave us questioning the very nature of evil. As the sun set over Derby, the facade of Mick Philpott's life glimmered with a deceptive allure. He managed to maintain a complicated existence with multiple partners, notably Merotte and Lisa, who inhabited his chaotic world. In a house bustling with tension and unspoken rivalries, they found themselves sharing more than just a roof.
Married Mick in 2003.
As they exchanged stories of his emotional manipulation, it became clear that Philpott was a master puppeteer, pulling strings from the shadows. While he basked in the attention and admiration of his partners, behind closed doors, he displayed a darker side, his unpredictable rages and ruthless control over their lives suffocating. In the heart of this twisted dynamic, Philpott's obsession with children emerged as a chilling motif. He viewed them not as precious lives, but as mere instruments to inflate his benefits. Over the years, he fathered 6 children, each one a pawn in his game. The joy of parenthood was lost on him. Instead, he was fixated on the financial incentives each child could bring. His insatiable greed warped his relationships, reducing the sacred bond of family to cold calculations and exploitation. Each birth was less a celebration than a transaction, a means to bolster his welfare checks. As the number of children grew, so did his ambitions, with Philpott seemingly reveling in the chaos he created. To him, these innocent lives were nothing more than an extension of his manipulative schemes, a way to sustain his lifestyle. The turning point came when Philpott decided to take his story to the public. In a shocking appearance on the infamous Jeremy Kyle show in 2008, he confidently defended his lifestyle, presenting himself as a victim of circumstance. His charisma was on full display, a calculated act designed to mask the chaos swirling beneath the surface. As he spun tales of hardship, the audience watched, rapt, unaware of the monster lurking behind his charismatic exterior. The reaction was immediate and visceral. While some viewers were drawn in by his charm, others were horrified by his apparent lack of remorse for his actions. The public persona he crafted was a dangerous facade, one that would ultimately shatter, exposing the horrors hidden within his family dynamics. As we delve deeper into his life, the question looms, how could a man so twisted gain the sympathy of so many, and what dark secrets lay beneath the surface of his carefully curated image? The chilling reality of Philpott's life would soon come crashing down, leaving devastation in its wake, and the world would witness the true extent of his monstrous nature. May 11th, 2012, marked a turning point not just in Mick Philpott's life, but in the lives of an entire community. As the inferno raged, the frantic sounds of sirens pierced the night air, slicing through the chaos like a knife. Flames clawed hungrily at the sky, illuminating the darkness in a hellish glow. Smoke billowed like ominous thunderclouds, suffocating all in its wake. Panic rippled through the neighborhood as onlookers rushed outside, their faces painted with disbelief and horror. In the midst of this pandemonium, a devastating realization dawned. 6 children were trapped within the fiery hell that had once been their home. The screams of neighbors echoed in Philpott's ears, a cacophony of terror that mingled with the crackle of flames. Firefighters battled the blaze with desperation, their silhouettes stark against the flames as they fought to save the children trapped inside. But as the embers fell like rain, the nightmare became irrevocably clear. The fire's cruel dance had taken more than just a house, it had consumed innocent lives, leaving nothing but ash and devastation in its wake. In that moment, Philpott's reality twisted. He was no longer the architect of chaos, but a mere spectator in a tragedy he had orchestrated. As the smoke cleared and dawn broke over Derby, the community was left to grapple with the unfathomable loss. The 6 children who perished in the blaze were not mere statistics, they were vibrant lives cut short too soon. As news of the tragedy spread, shockwaves rippled through the community. Initially, many rushed to defend Philpott, portraying him as a devoted father overwhelmed by grief. Yet, as more details emerged, the facade began to crumble. The stories of his abusive behavior, the manipulation, and the dark motives behind his actions started to seep into public consciousness. The tragedy wasn't just Philpott's, it belonged to the entire community, forever altering its fabric. In the days that followed, as more truths came to light, the shock morphed into a collective rage. Philpott, the man who had once walked among them, was now a symbol of betrayal and horror. The narrative had shifted, and the haunting question remained, how could a father betray his own children so utterly? As the sun set on Derby, the shadows of loss and betrayal loomed larger, echoing in the hearts of all who had loved those 6 innocent lives. In the chilling aftermath of the May 11th fire, as families mourned their losses, police began to notice unsettling patterns in Mick Philpott's behavior. His seemingly detached demeanor raised eyebrows, a striking contrast to the frantic grief one would expect from a grieving father. As detectives began their initial investigations, the focus shifted to the lone survivor of the tragic night, Lisa Willis, Philpott's partner. Her interviews revealed a tale of manipulation and abuse that was both shocking and heartbreaking. She spoke of Philpott's obsession with money and his disturbing view of their children as mere cash cows. As detectives pressed further, Lisa's statements became a crucial piece of the puzzle. While she expressed her disbelief that Philpott could be involved in such a heinous act, her words hinted at a more sinister reality that investigators were only beginning to uncover. The police had their suspicions, but they needed more to build a case against the man who had become the focal point of this tragic narrative. Days turned into a frantic investigation, and as the team sifted through the wreckage of the charred home, grim discoveries began to emerge. On May 15th, just 4 days after the fire, a crucial piece of evidence was found, a petrol container hidden within the debris. Its presence sent shockwaves through the investigation team, leading them to believe that this was no accident, it was an act of cold, calculated malice. Forensic experts worked tirelessly, scouring every inch of the scene. They discovered traces of accelerants, a damning link that tied Philpott to the horrifying crime. This evidence was the key that could unlock the chilling truth behind the flames. With each discovery, the narrative shifted from tragedy to an alarming realization of premeditation. It was becoming increasingly clear that Philpott had planned this catastrophic event, driven by desperation and greed. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that justice was a relentless predator, closing in on a man who had once been a master of manipulation. The truth was out there, buried beneath layers of deception, waiting to be unearthed, and soon, the world would know the real Mick Philpott, a man whose actions would forever alter the lives of so many. The day was February 12, 2013. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the trial of Mick Philpott, Mairead Philpott, and Paul Mosley commenced. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone in the room knew this trial was unlike any other. The heinous nature of the crime, the senseless loss of 6 innocent children, cast a dark shadow over the proceedings. As Philpott entered, eyes followed his every movement. His face showed no sign of remorse, only a smug confidence that made the tragedy even more chilling. The charges were damning: manslaughter of his own children. The weight of the evidence stacked against him was suffocating, and yet, the man at the center of it all maintained a strange arrogance. As the prosecution laid out its case, the horrifying details of the fire that tore through the Philpott household on May 11, 2012, were revisited. It became clear that this was not a random tragedy but a calculated act of greed and desperation. Philpott's defense was as twisted as his character. He played the victim, portraying himself as a grieving father who had suffered an unimaginable loss. His defense team attempted to frame him as a man whose life had spiraled out of control due to external pressures. Public perception shifted sharply as damning evidence emerged. The forensic details, the recordings of Philpott's casual, cold conversations about the fire, and his blatant manipulation of those around him painted a far darker picture. This was not a man grieving for his children. This was a man whose greed and cruelty had led to their deaths.
Not to be criticized. The judge was careful in reaching the conclusion she did. She gave very cogent and clear reasons for it. She assessed against her primary findings of fact the blameworthiness of Mairead Philpott and arrived at a sentence that reflected that very severe degree of blameworthiness, together with the immeasurable harm she had caused by the killing of her 6 children, for whom, like any other mother, she had an absolute responsibility. We have, after an examination of the circumstances and a careful consideration of the judge's remarks, come to the conclusion without...
On April 4, 2013, justice was served. Mick Philpott was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 15 years. Mairead Philpott and Paul Mosley received 17 years each for their role in the tragedy. The sentencing marked a moment of closure for some, but for the victims' families, the pain would never truly fade. The year 2013 marked the end of Mick Philpott's reign of terror, but the scars he left behind remain. 6 innocent lives were taken, 6 futures cut short, all because of one man's greed and twisted sense of control. The tragic events that unfolded on May 11, 2012, are more than a chilling crime. They are a brutal reminder of the darkness that can fester behind closed doors. As we reflect on Philpott's horrifying actions, we are forced to confront uncomfortable truths. His story isn't just about one man's evil, it's about the systemic failures that allowed such abuse to go unchecked for so long. Society's responsibility is to protect its most vulnerable, to ensure that no child suffers in silence. This case stands as a stark warning of what can happen when signs of abuse are ignored. For those watching, it's not just a tale of tragedy, it's a call to action. If you or someone you know is facing abuse, there is help. Reach out to the resources available, there is a way out. The story of Mick Philpott is a nightmare no one should have to endure. Let it serve as a catalyst for change, for awareness, and, most importantly, for protection of those who cannot protect themselves.